Hi everyone, Vinyl Monkey here again. Welcome back anyone, and welcome any new comers to this channel, which is a brief alphabetical tour through this vinyl collection behind me. And this week we're up to the letter F. Been a great week so far. Today's the 13th of April. Yesterday was the glorious 12th of April, where the pubs reopened, at least outside the pubs reopened, and also record shops. So yesterday afternoon I was able to spend a great couple of hours in RPM Records in Wingate, village near my hometown of Hartlepool. Fantastic record shop, amazing that it exists in such a small former mining village. But look that one up if you're not already aware of it and you're anywhere near the northeast of England. And then last night in the pub, which was great to have a few pints with my son and friends. The weather was absolutely Baltic. I did lose a couple of fingers to frostbite, but apart from that, it was just great to be back in or outside the pub again. But without further ado, let's get into the letter F. And it's been a bit of a struggle this week to decide which ones to put up from this first couple of bands. I've got quite a few albums by each of them, but it took me quite a while to decide. But here goes. The first band is the Four Tops, and this is Still Waters Run Deep from 1970. Four Tops don't need any introduction. I don't suppose everyone will be familiar with some of the hits they had through the late 60s, early 70s, which was their sort of high water period, really. This, as I say, is from 1970. It's just a great vocal band featuring the brilliant Levi Stubbs on lead vocals. And you know, if you're going to pick out one track from this album, maybe the opening track, Still Water, absolutely brilliant. Or their cover of Fred Neil's Everybody's Talking, that's also a great cover. But my favourite track is one of my favourite pop songs of all time, actually. It's All in the Game, and that's the third track here on side one. So that's the first album this week, the Four Tops, Still Waters Run Deep from 1970. Second album, and I did also had trouble picking which one of these to put up, but it's from the English rock band Free. I have all of Free's albums behind me there, and apart from the last one, Heartbreaker, which was clearly weaker than the rest, I think the rest of their albums are great, absolutely fantastic. This is their fourth album. And I've always said that this is my favourite. Why is it my favourite? Perhaps what helped me choose it as a favourite way back in the early 70s was the fact that the critics give it a little bit of a kick in. Commercially it didn't do so well, and me and my mates, we were all into Free. I had it on the back of my haversack, we were right into them. This had come out not long after their hit single Alright Now, and a lot of my mates were disappointed with this album and were critical of it, perhaps because it was a bit more mellow, laid back, it didn't contain so many rocking sort of songs. And for that reason, and I think perhaps partially just to be contrary, because they were knocking it, I was defending it, and I would argue that it was up there with their best, and I think that's just always stuck with me. But listening to it today, I still love this album. It is more mellow and laid back. I read somewhere that Free, the members of Free, had recently listened to music from the Big Pink by the band, and that had influenced their approach to this album. But whatever, it's a great album. Still stands up. Beautiful singing, as you'd expect, Paul Rodgers. Andy Fraser's bass right up front. Kossoff's sparse, simple guitar, absolutely beautiful. So great album, Highway by Free, 1971. The third album I'm going to put up, you might be a bit surprised after last week giving a bit of a sideways swipe to this guy. This is Brian Ferry, These Foolish Things from 1973, and I suppose the reason I give that swipe was because of what I've heard or read about Ferry's political views, his sort of right-wing views, his support for various dodgy organisations like the Conservative Party or the Countryside Alliance, his support for his son, which you'd expect anyone to support the son, but it was over the fox hunting issue. But I think I put this up for two reasons. The main reason I put it up is it's an absolutely superb album of covers, and I think Brian Ferry does covers brilliantly. Although his voice is perhaps, it's certainly distinctive, but it's perhaps not spectacular, but I just think he adds something to any song that he covers with his approach to it and the arrangement he brings to it. And this is no exception. It's a brilliant LP. So that's the first reason I wanted to put it up. I particularly draw your attention to his cover of Dylan's "The Hard Rain's Gonna Fall," which opens the album, or "Sympathy for the Devil," the Stones, which opens side 2. But most of the tracks on this are absolutely stunning covers and bring something different and additional to the originals, which is what the best covers do. But the other reason I put it up is just to, I suppose, remind myself or make the point or present the argument, is it possible to separate an artist's personal politics and views from their art? And I think where they're not singing about those political views or writing about them, then arguably it is possible. And we should try and separate them. But anyway, I'm sure there'd be plenty of people who would argue with that point of view. But I'll stand by that this is a great album. Brian Ferry, These Foolish Things, 1973. The next one, 10 years later, 1983, Marianne Faithfull, A Child's Adventure. And it's perhaps unfortunate that when most people think of Marianne Faithfull, they maybe tend to associate her with Mick Jagger and the Stones and the period in the 60s where she was a pop star and a film star and a major celebrity, and then fell from grace quite spectacularly in the 70s with heroin and alcohol addiction and what have you. But since that period, she's produced some really, really good stuff which has been critically acclaimed. She's got a beautiful singing voice. I think it's partly due to some of the health problems she had that it's gone so croaky and smoky and whatever, but she also writes the most beautiful songs, and this album is a great example of that. I think the song "Falling from Grace" and the following song "Morning Come," both great examples from this album. The only downer this album has for me is the sort of 80s sound and production. It sounds like a great band, they're very, very competent, they're played very well, but it's just that 80s sort of feel and production that doesn't sit well with me. It sort of grates on me a little bit, and I'd love to hear these songs performed and recorded nowadays with a different sort of band and a different type of sound, but that might be unlikely, as Marianne Faithfull had a really tough time. She caught COVID last year. She was really, really ill. I think there's some doubt on whether she's going to be able to recover a singing and performing voice, which would be a shame because she, not long before that, produced some really critically acclaimed albums, which I haven't yet got round to hearing. But anyway, let's hope she can recover. So that's Marianne Faithfull, A Child's Adventure, 1983. Moving on a lot further again, 2007, this is Ibrahim Ferrer and Mi Sueño, which is Spanish for My Dream. And Ibrahim Ferrer, he's been singing and leading bands in Cuba for over 40 years. Sadly, he died during the making of this album, and he died actually before it was released, but he came to prominence maybe 10 years or so before this, first through the Afro-Cuban All-Stars and then latterly through the Buena Vista Social Club band that Ry Cooder had helped bring together, and he was the singer with that band, which took him right around the world. Apart from America, of course, which wouldn't let him in, even to receive the Grammy Award that he'd been awarded. But that's a whole other story, America's relationship with Cuba, which maybe that's a different video series. But this is a beautiful album of love songs. Ferrer is backed by a beautiful band which has got piano and percussion and bass up front. And if putting this album on doesn't result in romance, then you probably haven't got a heartbeat, then I would suggest. But beautiful stuff. Ibrahim Ferrer, Mi Sueño, 2007. And then lastly, this is very different again. This is from 2015, and this is Father John Misty. I Love You Honey Bear is the title of the album, and I don't know whether you can see that, but I think that is Father John Misty, also known as Josh Tillmans, sitting on the knee of what looks like the Virgin Mary, with suckling on her breast, with sort of devil and all sorts of weird and unsavoury characters all around in there. And I think if you read any biography of Josh Tillmans, some of this might start to make sense. He had a very challenging childhood. He was the child of fundamentalist evangelical Christians who wouldn't let him listen to any music unless it was overtly Christian music. And it took him some time to reject all of that stuff, and he used his writing to come to terms with who he is. And his writing on this album, at least, and I suspect generally, is brutally honest. It can be explicit, but it's delivered in an epic sort of, often orchestral sort of style. He sings with a sort of religious type fervour. He's a very distinctive performer. I haven't seen him live, but I've seen clips of him. He looks like a superb performer. And this is a great double album. It plays at 45 RPM actually. Sound quality, as you'd expect, is great. Really challenging autobiographical songs. And that's Father John Misty, I Love You Honey Bear, from 2015. So that's it for the letter F this week. I hope you've found one or two there that you might be interested in and you might want to look up yourself. And I hope you might join me for next week for the letter G. Cheers.